On this Sunday night, thankful to finally be together. A Canadian cancer patient and her British partner are reunited thanks to cross-border travel changes.
Recovery has been a lot more difficult physically with this other fight.
But it's still not the case for so many others this holiday weekend. The RCMP bans Mounties from wearing a long-held symbol of police solidarity. But has the thin blue line become a symbol of division? Left without a child or answers.
Where's my $12,000? What do I get for that?
After a financially struggling adoption agency shuts down. And the young Canadians carrying the torch of change on this International Day of the Girl.
Global National with Robin Gill. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. An Ontario woman has a lot to be thankful for this long weekend. The pandemic forced Sarah Campbell to spend months separated from her fiancé because he lives overseas. During that time, she had to endure cancer surgery without him by her side. After months of begging Ottawa for help, the federal government finally lifted travel restrictions this month, allowing more types of family members to come to Canada, including Sarah's fiancé. As Jeff Semple explains, hundreds of other Canadians are still waiting to find out when they can see their loved ones again.
Sarah Campbell has waited 8 months for this moment.
As soon as I saw the car turn down the street, I started crying and kind of hyperventilating.
She and her British fiancé Jacob were supposed to get married in June and begin their life together in Canada. But the pandemic border closure meant he wasn't allowed to enter the country.
We realized, number one, that we would have to postpone our wedding. And number two, I found a lump on the side of my neck.
In July, she was diagnosed with stage 2 thyroid cancer, forced to endure surgery with Jacob stuck in the UK.
Fighting cancer, but also fighting just to have my fiancé by my side as I go through this. It's a twofold fight that no one should ever have to go through.
But many others did. Campbell joined an online campaign of thousands calling on the Canadian government to open the border to unmarried couples and those with a dying relative, like Arthur Santiago.
Charlie, I can see it in her eyes. She's just holding on to see her family.
His wife has stage 4 cancer. Doctors say she may only have weeks left to live, and she wants to see her sister, who lives in the Philippines, but their request for a visit was denied.
But what we do not understand is how compassionate exemptions were not here from day one.
Long-term relationship.
Last week, the government finally changed the rules, now accepting applications from committed couples, extended family members, and others on compassionate grounds. The government has already received hundreds of applications.
It's amazing because
this weekend, Santiago received good news.
My wife and her sister will be able to see each other. A flight is booked. She's flying in on Thursday, and they'll be able to be with each other before it's too late.
And among the first to be approved to enter Canada under the new rules, Campbell's fiancé, Jacob.
Honestly, it felt like a dream.
Her weak immune system meant she couldn't meet him at the airport, so she waited outside of her parents' house.
I basically just launched myself at him.
Yeah, I was sort of worried I was going to hit the tarmac.
Jacob is now isolating in the basement for 2 weeks, though they are allowed distanced visits in the yard just in time for Thanksgiving.
But I'm just thankful that he's in the same house, in the same country.
The day after his quarantine is done, the couple plans to get married before Sarah begins radiation treatment in November, this time with her fiancé by her side. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Turning now to the COVID-19 situation across the country. For the first time since Wednesday, Quebec recorded fewer than 1,000 daily cases. It added 942 new infections today. Ontario is also seeing a slight drop in cases. 649 people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. In the U.S., COVID-19 isn't stopping the Republicans on two fronts tonight. U.S. President Donald Trump is preparing for several campaign rallies this week after his doctors declared him no longer a transmission risk. And battle lines are being drawn as the Senate Judiciary Committee prepares for hearings to confirm Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Jennifer Johnson has more.
The stage is set for a showdown between Senate Republicans and Democrats over confirming Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. Democrats argue the next high court justice, a lifetime appointment, should be picked by the president elected November 3rd. Early voting has already begun in several states.
She is being sent on assignment to the Supreme Court by President Trump, and we know what that assignment is: eliminate the Affordable Care Act.
Democrats fear the Capitol Hill hearing could become another super spreader. Two of the Judiciary Committee members, Senators Mike Lee and Tom Tillis, tested positive for the virus after attending Coney Barrett's nomination ceremony at the White House 2 weeks ago.
Senate Republicans will follow the guidance, the medical guidance of the Capitol physician.
Barrett is expected to be grilled on her conservative stances on abortion and same-sex marriage.
I'm feeling great. I don't know about you. How's everyone feeling?
Barrett will be in the hot seat as the White House releases a letter from the president's physician saying he's no longer a transmission risk for COVID-19, but not saying if he's tested negative for the virus.
I'm immune, so the president is in very good shape to fight the battle.
On Saturday, new COVID-19 cases hit their highest mark since August. Record numbers reported in 6 states.
What we thought might be just a bump after Labor Day clearly is a resurgence in the virus heading into the fall and the winter. You're seeing cases build across the entire country. There's now about 15 states with a positivity rate above 10%.
While on the campaign trail, Democratic candidate Joe Biden has blasted President Trump for downplaying the pandemic.
We lose anywhere from 700 to 1,000 people a day dead.
Thank you, Candace.
But the newly invigorated president will take his message not to fear the virus to his base at rallies planned this week in key swing states. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
The U.S. is now no longer the only country in the world to have more than 7 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. India reached the grim milestone today, adding another 74,000 cases in the last 24 hours. India is on track to surpass the U.S. to become the pandemic's worst-hit country in the coming weeks. Experts say the true number of infections may be much higher because testing rates are lower in India than in many other countries. People living in England are bracing for tighter COVID-19 restrictions. The country's prime minister is expected to back a new 3-tier local lockdown system tomorrow. It could force pubs and restaurants in pandemic hotspots to temporarily close. England's deputy chief medical health officer says the UK is now at a tipping point. Without action, there's fear UK hospitals will be overwhelmed in the coming weeks. The RCMP has told Mounties they are no longer to wear an image that's used to show solidarity with police and their families. It's a black and white Canadian flag with a thin blue line, but it's not an official symbol of the RCMP. As Catherine Urquhart explains, it comes as police organizations are examining their relationships with minority communities.
They're known around the world for their red serge dress uniform. Members of the RCMP are strictly guided by a uniform and dress manual. Their appearances are now the focus of a controversial internal memo about members wearing a thin blue line.
My reaction was one of surprise and concern.
On Friday, Mounties across the country received a directive saying in part, the subdued flag with a blue bar has become widespread in North America as a sign of solidarity and support for police. While this may be common, it is not an approved symbol and is not to be worn on our uniform. Growing scrutiny of the police and calls for reforms are also referenced in the edict, which states, we have been a focal point in difficult public conversations about the role of police in our society. Within policing communities across North America, the thin blue line has long been a symbol of support for one another.
It really depicts the line that police officers walk every day, keeping society free from chaos.
But critics say the symbol ignores the larger issue of police violence against racialized communities and promotes an us versus them mentality.
It has a much and I'm going to use this word deliberately, much darker side that is very much associated with being anti-Black Lives Matter, being, pro-racial profiling.
Regardless of criticism and the RCMP directive, many officers are vowing to continue wearing the thin blue line.
We've also commissioned some custom blue line patches, and we'll be sending them out to all of our members across Canada.
Members who don't adhere could face code of conduct reprimands. RCMP management perhaps forced to choose between supporting the rank and file and pressure to make changes to the face of policing in Canada. Catherine Urquhart, Global News, Vancouver.
For the first time since January, China has granted consular access to 2 detained Canadians. In a statement, Global Affairs says Canada's ambassador to China was granted virtual access to Michael Spavor on Friday and Michael Kovrig on Saturday. The 2 men have been detained in China for nearly 2 years. They were taken into custody in 2018, shortly after the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver. Residents in parts of Louisiana are dealing with flooded streets and downed trees after the second hurricane in 6 weeks. More than 400,000 homes and businesses were in the dark this morning after Hurricane Delta hammered the state. The storm hit just weeks after Hurricane Laura, a Category 4 storm, devastated the region. This Atlantic hurricane season has broken several records, including the first time there have been 10 named storms to make landfall in the U.S. A temporary ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan looks anything but peaceful. At least 5 people died overnight after a rocket hit the Azerbaijani city of Ganja overnight. Both countries agreed to a Russia-backed truce that went into effect yesterday. But 2 weeks of fighting in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh continues. Azerbaijan is accusing Armenia of targeting civilians in this latest attack.
Ganja city is more than 100 kilometers away from the theater of military operations. What was the reason to attack this city? What was the reason to attack Mingachever cities of Azerbaijan? There is no military targets. It doesn't have any necessity, or in no way it can be justified from the military necessity.
And the Armenian government denies the claim, calling it an absolute lie and blaming Azerbaijan of shelling Armenian-populated areas of Nagorno-Karabakh. The enclave is legally part of Azerbaijan, but largely inhabited and controlled by ethnic Armenians. The 2 weeks of fierce fighting has left more than 300 dead. Coming up, Saskatchewan's first safe drug consumption site opens, but is it too little, too late? And Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, opens up about online abuse. It has been one of the deadliest years on record for overdoses in Saskatchewan. This month, the province opened its first supervised drug consumption site. But as Kyle Benning reports, advocates say more needs to be done to save lives.
For Dawn Wilson, a supervised consumption site could have been a lifeline for her son. He overdosed 5 times in 4 years.
And knowing that there were people there who could talk to him, who would help him, who would make referrals for him, yeah. Otherwise, he's just wandering the streets, sleeping in back alleys, using used needles. At the end, it was horrible.
From January to August this year, the Saskatchewan Coroner Service says there have been 40 confirmed and 190 suspected overdose deaths for a total of 230. That's nearly 3 times as many that took place in 2010 and nearly a 70% increase from 2019's figures. The executive director of Prairie Harm Reduction is not mincing words over the province's response to Saskatchewan's drug crisis.
A joke.
Jason Mercredi says he hasn't seen any urgency addressing overdose deaths.
So they can talk all they want about around the issue. The result is we have people dying, and so we need to deal with this immediate issue.
When the province declined to give PHR any of the $1.3 million it requested to run the site this year, it raised enough money on its own to hire a paramedic to open. It's the only Health Canada approved drug consumption site between Calgary and Thunder Bay. Dawn Wilson was able to find private treatment services for her son, but she believes the public doesn't see everything a safe consumption site can provide.
Because they don't realize they're talking about people's children, spouses. No one's immune to this, right? And yeah, it's much needed. And I think people just don't understand what harm reduction means.
Saskatchewan is midway through an election campaign. The NDP says it would fund the site if elected, and the Saskatchewan Party says it won't rule that out either. Kyle Benning, Global News, Saskatoon.
Still ahead, left in limbo. What happens when a couple pays for an adoption, but the agency goes under?
You're watching Global National.
When a British Columbia adoption agency suddenly closed last year, potential parents who'd spent thousands of dollars in hopes of building their families were left in limbo. At the time, Choices Adoption said it was because of a drop in international adoptions, the main source of its funding. But Global News has uncovered documents that show the agency had been in trouble for years. Robin Gill reports.
What are you thinking? Yeah. Patricia and Aaron Pearson know how lucky they are to have a daughter. Her art is everywhere in the house. But it wasn't easy to conceive. So when they decided to grow their family, they turned to adoption.
You go into adoption knowing there are no guarantees and knowing that it's going to be a roller coaster. But I think our journey has had more ups and downs and the journey of other people in our situation than would normally be expected.
They had no qualms paying $12,000 to an agency called Choices, but the adoption they so desperately wanted never happened.
If we paid for a couch and we didn't get our couch, there would be a recourse. We would be able to sue someone or do something. We've now paid essentially to bring a child into our family, and there's no recourse. I can't go to anyone and say, where's my $12,000? What do I get for that? What are you going to do for me?
For 30 years, Choices was a reputable, not-for-profit organization. There was never an audit, but Global News has obtained one accounting firm's review which found Choices was running a $107,000 deficit in 2018.
Because of those financial problems, the board decided to close the agency in April 2019. Then a new board came in to try to save it. But they soon realized the money problems were far worse than they were led to believe. Choices closed for good in October of that same year.
Up to 90 families were left in the lurch, and the agency was still taking money, even though a document showed the board was adamant Choices not take on any new clients months before they closed.
We knew that there was people that were registering with Choices within the 2 weeks prior to them closing.
The minutes from board meetings show Robin Pike, who ran the agency for 7 years, insisted all along the agency was viable. We tried 3 times to contact Robin Pike, who ran the agency for 7 years.
Hi, this is Robin Pike. Please leave me a message.
She never returned our calls.
It's the Sandown lease.
Now the Pearsons have to start the difficult process all over again.
What do you think was worse, the emotional investment or the financial investment?
Emotional.
100%.
Yeah.
Despite the emotional toll, they're not ruling out adoption and still want to welcome another child into their family. Robin Gill, Global News, Victoria.
In part 2 of our story, we'll take a look at the steps some families are taking to get answers about how the money they paid the agency was spent. That's tomorrow on Global National. Up next, the Canadian girls trying to change the world and how one woman is honoring them. Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, has opened up about the online abuse she received since joining the royal family. This weekend, she and her husband, Prince Harry, joined a podcast called Teenager Therapy as part of World Mental Health Day. Meghan spoke about online trolling during her conversation with students from a California high school.
I'm told that in 2019, I was the most trolled person in the entire world, male or female. But what was able to just be manufactured and churned out, it's almost unsurvivable.
5 teenagers created the groundbreaking podcast to explore mental health issues. Today is International Day of the Girl, a day that began 9 years ago to amplify the voices of young women and advocate for equal rights. This pandemic has been particularly hard on women, impacting everything from childcare to increased domestic violence. But as Heather Urex-West explains, young Canadian voices are providing hope that change is possible.
Come here. Hi.
Hi. Charlene Rocha is a 16-year-old activist determined to change the world.
I'm really involved with the climate movement. That's one thing that I'm really passionate about. But I'm also really involved with gender equality.
My name is Charlene Rocha, and I'm a youth activist and striker.
Rocha, who was recently featured in a documentary about young activists, says she's been inspired by the young women who've come before her. People like Greta Thunberg.
This is just the beginning. We will continue.
And Canadian activist Autumn Pelletier.
I'm lending my voice to speak up for water and Mother Earth.
It's that kind of inspiration that former Conservative MP Rona Ambrose is hoping to provide in a new book that celebrates girls around the world.
There's 9 girls from 9 different parts of the world. And of course, we have a Canadian girl. Her name is Sokanen, but she's actually based on the true life story of Shannon Custagen.
It's hard to feel pride when your classrooms are cold and mice run over our lunches.
In 2008, 13-year-old Custagen began advocating for a new school to be built in her community on the Attawapiskat First Nation. Her campaign became a rallying cry for educational rights for Indigenous children across the country. Sadly, Custagen died in a car accident at the age of 15. But on these pages, her story lives on, inspiring a new generation of young women like Charlene Rocha to pick up the torch and keep working towards change.
My hope for the future is that girls all across the world are able to really embrace themselves and stand up for causes that they believe in.
Heather Urix West, Global News, Calgary.
That is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is all the beautiful fall colors near Birds Creek in Ontario. We love showcasing your part of Canada. Email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching and happy Thanksgiving.